Good evening, everyone. I'm Sneha from Pharma Now, and on behalf of entire Pharma Now team, I'd like to thank you for joining tonight. So we have more than 260 plus registrants for this session. Many of them are CIOs, Chief Digital Transformation Officers, heads of IT validation, heads of digital transformation, and digital leaders from pharma companies across the India, the United States, and Europe. The quality of this room is extraordinary. And before we begin with our webinar, I want to take 2 minutes to tell you why tonight exists. You are joining a webinar, but what you are really joining is the beginning of something larger. For years, India's pharma IT community has not had a dedicated platform, not a platform built specifically for people who sit at the intersection of technology, compliance, and pharmaceutical manufacturing. The CIOs, the IT validation heads, the digital transformation leaders, the people who are making decisions right now about AI, data integrity, manufacturing system, and regulatory compliance without a single credible space to learn, connect, and exchange ideas at the level these decisions deserve. The platform is what we are building. And this platform is called GPACTS, the Global Pharma AI Compliance and Technology Summit. GPACTS is not just a conference, it is a year round knowledge engine for pharma technology leadership in India, built on three pillars. So I'll quickly explaining the three pillars that we are building under GPACTS. So as Pharma Now, our media and content platform reaches over 120,000 pharma professionals monthly. A curated conference series that brings together the most senior pharma IT minds in the country. And a growing community of practitioners, regulators, and thought leaders committed to raising the quality of this conversation. Tonight is one chapter, this webinar, with Dr. Ajaz Hussain is the opening session of GPACTS 2026 series. And that follows over the next 4 months is a journey across 3 cities and 1 flagship summit. So in June, we come to Mumbai, the Pharma AI and Data Congress, that's PADC, a focused one-day conference for pharma IT and digital leaders in India's commercials and regulatory pharma hub. AI in Pharma, Data Congress, Data Governance, Digital Transformation with senior practitioners and case studies from the companies driving this change. So we have to cover all of this. Then we move to Ahmedabad, the Pharma Manufacturing IT Congress in the month of June 2026. India's pharmaceutical manufacturing heartland. The conversation here goes deeper into the plant, MES, LIMS, manufacturing data, OT systems, Industry 4.0. What digital transformation actually looks like on the shop floor of the regulated facility. This is what we are going to cover in Ahmedabad show. In August, we arrive at the flagship, which is called GPACTS 2026, the Global Pharma AI Compliance and Technology Summit. This is happening in Hyderabad in August 2026. This is going to be 2 full-day event, 3 tracks, hundreds of most senior pharma technology leaders in the country under one roof. AI and machine learning in regulated environments, cybersecurity and data integrity, digital manufacturing and supply chain, the regulatory future of pharma technology, and a global perspective, with speakers from US, Europe, and across Asia. The theme that runs through everything we are building, from tonight's webinar to the Hyderabad flagship, is one question: how does India's pharma industry deployed technology at the speed business demands while maintaining the compliance integrity that patients and regulator requires. That is not a technology question, it is a leadership question. And it is a question that every person in the room is living with every single day. GPACTS exists to help you answer it with the best thinking, the most credible voice, and the most relevant community in India's pharma technology space. Tonight, you get Dr. Ajaz Hussain. The rest of the year, you get the full platform. Welcome to GPACTS 2026, and let's begin with the show. So, I'll quickly introduce you to the speaker that we are having. So, most of the people in this room are being asked to deploy AI in their organizations. Almost none of you have been told clearly and authoritatively how FDA thinks about what you are building. Our speaker tonight was inside FDA when the foundational quality philosophy was built. He served as Deputy Director of the Office of Pharmaceutical Science at US FDA, the office responsible for how FDA evaluates pharmaceutical manufacturing and quality systems. He is now founder and CEO of Insight Advice and Solutions, and he sits on the Pharma Now Advisory Board. He is one of a very small number of people in the world who can tell you with direct authority what FDA actually looks for. Not what the guidance documents say, but what the philosophy behind them requires. So, Dr. Ajaz Hussain, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I'm really glad to reconnect with a lot of number of people that I have worked with before. So it's a pleasure to reconnect with you. I thought I had retired in 2020, but looks like I'm being pulled back into some active role. At the moment, my only major project is working for a DARPA-related project to bring manufacturing back to US. Other than that, I serve on a number of advisory board. But with that sort of background, I just wanted to share my screen. I, I was very pleased to note that a large number of you have not yet implemented AI in GxP mode. I think that's a very prudent position to be in. But at the same time, AI, whether it's machine learning to generative AI based on large language models, really are accelerating. They bring a double-edged sword. They offer significant advantages, but significant risk at the same time. And I think thinking about how to prudently bring this about and implement and leverage it is a very, very important and timely question that we need to think about. So at the moment, the buzzword is around AI, and AI is being considered as the large language models, but that's not just AI. I have to give you some background. Since 1989, my academic research was in machine learning and its application to formulation development and so forth. In fact, the first ever publication on artificial neural networks in application for formulation development in 1991 in Farm Research was mine. And then before I joined FDA, I had advanced machine learning tools to an extent of thinking about computer-aided formulation design. And for example, for platform formulations such as sustained release, predicting dissolution rate. In fact, it was my work in machine learning that FDA got interested and asked me to consider coming to FDA. And I was naive then. I thought, well, I have all the data in the world. I can build the computer-aided formulation design with use of FDA data. That was completely a misnomer. But well, at FDA, I had several projects. I, in fact, built a network called SUPAC IR network, scale up and post approval change for immediate release dosage form network, because I was at that point managing the research program for supporting the policy development for scale up and post approval changes. And we had a lot of research data coming in from University of Maryland and other places, and I had the data for the same drugs like metoprolol and piroxicam and so forth within house. And what I realized was the only one which I could make meaningful prediction was for metoprolol tartrate, immediate release dosage form, but for others the system didn't work. And the reason for that is much of the data at FDA is cherry picked in the sense it's not truly representative of what the reality is. And so underpinning the whole notion of quality by design and the PAT effort was to progress the system towards being able to approach computer-aided formulation design. So that's my background that I come from. And so in that sense, I tend to think about in layers. What's the bottom layer here? The bottom layer I call classical AI, alien intelligence, not artificial intelligence. In that, what I see is many companies are dependent on consultants, especially ex-FDA consultants, to come and do their SOP writing or writing for warning letters, response, and so forth. And I find that very disturbing. I think those who work in pharmaceutical manufacturing should self-author their own SOPs, their own response to FDA, and so forth. But much of the industry struggles in that regard. And I would like to see that alien aspects of having my ex colleagues from FDA coming to write those SOPs and so forth end. That's my goal, is to end that practice. But at the same time, I think machine learning, where I think we come from, is pharmaceutical formulation development, product development is moving slowly from what I used to call art to science, or from opinions to science. For example, the scale up factor of 10x. The most of the scale up post approval change guidelines that you see, the three batch concept for and so forth, these are opinions. These are not science based, and these are not risk based. And much of the legacy products are based on opinions, not science. So at the same time, I think there is significant challenge in how we interpret specifications. For example, compendial specifications. Compendial specifications are market standards, not for quality control test. But 99% of the industry doesn't even understand that. And they get trapped in common cause variability, and they keep repeating the same issues again and again. And for example, if you have a specification such as a compendial specification for content uniformity of uh, uh, the take 10 tablets to 90, the assay is 90 to 110, and no unit is outside 90 to 110, and the standard deviation allowed is 6.8%. If you think closely, every batch is out of specification. If you said in your batch record no unit is outside 80 to or 90 to 110, and you accept a standard deviation of 6.8. But many companies don't understand that. So this is where I think the FDA process validation guideline comes into play, 2011, which provides a statistical basis to assess um, um, uh, stat, uh, specifications correctly, ASTM standards, and so forth. So that becomes a foundation. So, with that background, what I say is think about artificial intelligence going from alien intelligence to machine learning, especially the statistical aspects to be predictive, your deep learning over the life cycle of a product. Then, really, once you have that foundation, you can leverage generative AI effectively in the GxP environment and move towards smart manufacturing with agentic AI and so forth. So, that's the way I think about it. So current good manufacturing practices, good means valid, reproducible, repeatable, process, method, and claims that you make. Think about IQ, OQ, PQ for materials, machines, and mind. I think from a validation perspective, we have focused on IQ, OQ, PQ for machines that we install, operate, and qualify in our factory. But we need to extend that thinking to materials. Just don't think about certificate of analysis, because certificate of analysis of materials does not tell you much about functionality and performance in the manufacturing system, because it's based on purity and impurity. Similarly, think about IQ, OQ, PQ for mind. In fact, 21 CFR 211.25 is education, training, and experience. That sort of comes into play. And the goal I have in my mind is to support the industry to self-author what you write, and don't depend on external consultants. And that's the sign of maturity. Learning from experience is the key. So I think the interesting warning letter just happened in April to a cosmetic company, which FDA essentially said you used AI agents to create drug product specifications, procedures, and master production records. Furthermore, you replied that you were not aware of the legal requirements. So do you think this company was even qualified to do what they're doing? No, obviously not. But that was a cosmetic company. So I think at least we save some face and say, oh, they didn't know what to do, but we do, we know what to do. Think about that IQ as intelligence qualified. The company was trapped in what I call compliance theater. It's asking the question, how do we validate AI in GxP, which is a wrong question. The question really is, can you prove stability and capability of your personnel, processes, and products? I think that's the key. Statistical process control, which is the foundational basis for FDA's process validation guideline 2011, is stability and capability. And I think we need to think about that for not just people, not just for processes, but for people, products, and our practices. So think from that perspective, who is ready for AI and in terms of application, but at the same time also think about AI as a means to get rid of the old challenges, get ahead of the challenges, be more proactive. So that may not mean that you're using AI in a GxP mode per se in a factory, but more in terms of corrective action, preventive action, more in terms of development, people development, product development, and so forth. That's where I think it can come and play. Because here is a leading pharmaceutical company, which if I look at that, I just blocked, I don't want to point any fingers, but this is a leading company. Is it its QMS is mature? FDA doesn't think so. And you can see the reasons for that. But much of the generic companies are in that mode. Very few pharma companies, I can count 3 to 4 companies which really are ready for a smart factory, and if the maturity level of 4, most of them are stuck at 3. Some are, only a few handful are getting to number 4, which is a mature of agentic AI coming into play. But that's the journey we have in mind. So the reality check really is, how many companies and professionals are trapped in the compliance theater? How many are seeking answers to how do we validate AI in GxP? How many can prove stability and capability of personal processes and products? I think that's the last question is the foundational questions. If you're not able to prove, the question I will ask is, how can you leverage AI, whether it's AI or generative AI, to get to the capability, suitability, and capability is a question. For example, I think this is not using in a GxP mode, but you're using it in a development mode or improvement mode. In that sense, many people have talked to a struggle with the ASTM standards that are listed as references in FDA's process validation guideline, and interpretation of specifications in a correct way, and at the same time, statistical process control. I can easily see. I've actually used generative AI. I used to use large language models, but I've sort of distilled small language models for my own personal use. It's very useful to really translate FDA guidance or ASTM standards into a practice mode in a test situation and utilize it from that perspective. So you have to think about leveraging that technology to get out of and get ahead of where you are, but bringing practical application of AI, especially generative AI in GxP is far, it will take a long time. We are not there yet. So my question to you is to reflect, where are you? Trapped in compliance theater, seeking answers to how to validate AI, and can prove. Now, if you're thinking about machine learning, the first NDA approval based on AI analysis happened in 2002. In fact, I helped the review team get to that stage because the PK/PD profile and the patient cohorts that could not be matched with traditional population PK modeling, and we used artificial neural network to map that. And in fact, that paper is published in Pharmaceutical Research in 2002 of the first FDA NDA approval based on machine learning analysis of PK/PD data. So I think validation of machine learning from that perspective is you think about that as validating a mathematical model. In my mind, machine learning, like the backpropagation neural network, is multiple nonlinear regression analysis in one way of thinking about it. But and that gives you a basis to validate that. And I think Center for Devices has approved a number of products for many years with machine learning for pattern recognition and so forth. So those principles are very well established. I think the buzz on large language models and use of generative AI is there's a lot of hot air balloon that's likely to burst on that, but that also is a double-edged sword that provides wonderful opportunity, especially in countries like India and others where we struggle to write our own procedures and FDA response and so forth. Using it to learn how to do better to self-author would be an opportunity to think about. And that's what I've been sort of talking about, writing about. I use SMART acronym in a way that borrowed from the hard disk, self-monitoring, analysis, reporting technology, but I use it in more different ways in my writings on LinkedIn. Here I'm sort of using specificity, measurability, achievability, review, and transformational aspects of how do you use this. How do you get to pinpoint the root cause, track progress towards maturity, deploy realistic, scalable interventions, continuous cross-functional scrutiny, including the diagnostics, but embed AI literacy and truth-seeking governance into to turn AI into a catalyst for patient safety, innovation, and development. In fact, about a couple of years ago, I wrote this thing for Pharma Now. The link is provided. Smart practice for responding to FDA observational warning. So, in a typical setting, when you have an FDA warning, the people are really trying to struggling to come together. Much of the time, people are finger pointing and so forth. But here, instead of hiring a consultant, use AI, a generative AI like Gemini or Cloud, to say, all right, here is my warning letter. Do a complete search of similar warning letters. Make sure you understand how an FDA inspectors, what the FDA inspectors should do, review everything in the public domain, and write me a response letter. So if that is a response letter that is written externally, it is draft zero. You're not going to use it. You're just going to use it as a basis for bringing a cross-functional team to challenge the assumptions and challenge that draft letter so that you can then dig into the whole process and take ownership of how you should write that letter without having an ex-FDA consultant paying them thousands of dollars. I think that would be one application that I would really ask you to consider applying. But future of that really depends on your manufacturing processes need to be stable and capable before you can progress any step further. So the bottom line is foundational. Bottoms up is foundational. So ensure that you start with layer by layer The traditional descriptive GMP regulatory protocols, validation logic, batch release tools, CF, and etc., make sure the data integrity is achieved. If it fails, the audit trail is clear, and you. But then you move towards pattern recognition with machine learning. Then it becomes predictive maintenance, process variability prediction, anomaly detection, yield, and so forth and so forth. And then you move up, and that would be way of thinking about getting to leveraging that. So here I use one example. I used to be I was helping some time ago Applied Materials build their smart factory RX system. And there was a case study where we did machine learning at Lonza to predict the risk, the likelihood of sterility failure in injectable dosage form, which is amazingly difficult to do. And machine learning taking a holistic approach to and looking at company logs of who attendance log, the entire factory data was utilized in this, and we could actually start predicting sterility failures and the risk factors for sterility failures, including which of the personnel have posed more risk and so forth. So this really was an amazing opportunity there, because here and I was asked to think about this. Uh, but here would be where I would apply that. Regulatory guidelines or expectations are evolving. You'll have to take a hard look at those things. And really, where I want to end this discussion and open up for discussion is, what do you do tomorrow, or what do you do on Monday? I think the very first step really is to start before your next review of any AI system. Get a cross-functional team together: IT lead, QA manager, end user. Ask each and the simple questions. Uh, I think what would tell you this system is giving you a wrong answer? Three different answers, failure modes are not understood. No one can answer, system is not ready for GxP and deployment, would be my sort of take. So I'll stop here, but I really would like to engage in a discussion with you on these aspects.
Thank you so much, sir, for such wonderful insights. And the smart shift that you have mentioned is going to be really helpful to everyone who has joined here. So now the forum is open for the questions. I request everyone to type your questions in the chat box, and the sir will be answering that. So, sir, we have first question here. What will be the first step of AI deployment or plan for the newly constructed facility for FDA?
What will be the first step for AI deployment or plan? So, in a sense, I think let's sort of break it down. You're setting up a new plant. You're setting up a new system. So the specifications for that facility. So a lot of this is pre GxP environment, setting up and so forth. Um, Writing of the documents and so forth. Here, agentic AI properly used can be very useful. Okay, but you're not. This is before you get into GxP manufacturing. For GxP manufacturing, really, I think the my suggestion is, if you are able to demonstrate proper stability and capability of your manufacturing process as per FDA's process validation guideline 2011, I think then you start thinking about collecting data on a regular basis for annual product review and so forth. And that then becomes a source of confident, valid data that you can start using machine learning for a number of things. That would be my suggestion. How do we handle model data drift? I think this is at the moment, not a single regulatory agency is allowing the machine learning tools that have been developed to learn from experience. They're being used as static models, so they're fixed in time. Okay, uh, so if you are using this for prediction, this is one of the biggest challenge. Is the regulations are pretty much restrictive. Any drift in that could trigger a prior approval supplement and a reapproval of that. And that is a significant challenge that we have.
So, sir, next question.
I think which area to target first? Preventive maintenance would be one area. Preventive maintenance in a factory, qualifying raw materials, and creating a knowledge base of excipient functionality, material functionality, not just a certificate of analysis. Utilizing vibrational spectroscopy such as Raman and near IR, creating that database and looking at patterns that relate to functionality of the material would be one key aspect, I think. And so I'm going against and also I think a lot incorporating AI in a way that provides simulation and training for improve the training program for people for GxP requirements, and essentially reduce the need for hiring external consultants. Utilize generative AI and others to distill out what I call draft zero, which then everybody looks at and challenges, and so that you have a starting point you have on same page. You can then discuss, debate, challenge what that thing is, and come up with your own self authorship. That would be the way I would suggest. What does the standard validation framework look like for a machine learning and AI pipeline? It doesn't look any different. You get to process validation per FDA process validation guideline 2001. That then essentially allows you to generate data that you have more confidence in for every batch. So without being able to show capability of a process, CPK, for example, for if manufacturing process, and showing that it's stable, you don't have evidence of sameness. Okay, it's all opinion. So that is the foundational step of stability and capability is the foundational step for you to collect data, so you are able to distinguish trends, common cause variation, as well as identify and detect and predict special cause. So the Lonza example that I suggested was if sterility failure that can occur in an injectable plant it seems random. It happens. There's no way to predict that. The Lonza example shows you can predict that. Okay, so companies that are able to predict even something which seems random, sterility failure, will be positioned as low risk companies by FDA, and will have big advantage. So that would be the way I would suggest. So again, I'll point to the fundamental basis of process validation, and then generalizing that for broadly for materials, people, and also how you'll use AI would be a good starting point. We are living in an era of Gen AI advancing for creating AI agents. Still, FDA guidance on process validation is not revised after the last edition. Well, let me put it this way. 90% of companies do not even achieve that validation, which is in 2011. So first get to that valid statistical process control and then talk about it. I haven't seen a single company which is achieving consistently that level of validation today. And the only reason FDA has not enforced the requirement of that is, which is a requirement process validation, is because of drug shortages. Okay, so if you think you are achieving the level of statistical process control honestly, you should be Six Sigma company by now. I know of three companies which have achieved that. Most 99% have not achieved that. Is FDA coming up with AI guideline? I don't know. I think at the moment where we are in the world is dividing. Whether we will have so think about this. Within few months, the world will divide, and if you are one dominated by China, one by US, PAX Silicon for US. So even the AI, so the harmonization is dead. Okay, so let me put it this way. All the efforts of international harmonizations, everything is collapsing. If you haven't looked at the geopolitics, what's happening? The world is changing. So we have to think differently now. So, how to introduce AI in quality control within pharma formulation? I think so. Method validation. Let's take a look at method validation. Many of the methods that you use are compendial methods. We have never validated those methods. They have verified those methods. Okay. So, what I will challenge to you is we have a mindset of an HPLC solution based analytical method validation criteria. Okay. Much of pharmaceutical manufacturing is a physical process, mixing, granulation, compaction, and so. So these are physical processes. Chemistry is not happening. Okay. Physical chemistry aspect is important. Now, the difference between method validation of a solution standard curve versus a physical attribute like as shape, particle size, and so forth is every sample is unique. You need a different approach to validation, gauge R&R. So there is a wonderful example of a ANDA that took FDA 8 years to review, 8 years review. The company is Apotex, and the product was generic Nasonex, uh, Nasonex, and the issue was particle shape. So Apotex had called me in for a scientific dispute. So I have a presentation on my slide share on that, uh, and validation of the particle shape became the issue. And you know how many years FDA took to review that? 8 years. I'm not joking. So I have a whole case study presentation on that. Take a look at that. So analytical method validation, especially for physical attributes, especially for utilizing vibrational spectroscopy, whether you come from the perspective of principal component analysis or linear, or you bring in a approach for machine learning for pattern recognition, that would be an important area to secure very quickly, because that allows you to get a handle on raw material variability coming in. Okay, especially not from a purity or impurity perspective necessarily, but from functionality perspective, because the especially now with the supply chains being disrupted and so forth. One of my challenges here right now is I'm trying to build the whole supply chain in US, completely in US, not depend on anybody else. How do you do that? I think all of us will have to focus on incoming raw materials, because the variation is going to grow. They may meet the certificate of analysis, but they may not perform well in the manufacturing process, and that would be a application that you should think about. What failure modes are unique to AI compared to traditional AI systems? Again, AI, then you have to break it up. If I look at machine learning, I think machine learning failure modes really are becoming overfitting. I'll use a statistical term, overfitting. It sort of memorizes thing but does not generalize to beyond the training set would be one. But generative AI has so many problems of hallucination and so forth. In fact, as a companion to this, I wrote a blog. Much of AI being used at FDA is doubtful. I mean, I don't trust FDA's use of ELSA. It hallucinates. The reports coming from the Department of Health and Human Services, from approved by White House, are all nonsense, complete hallucinations. This is how bad the system is at the moment. Anyway, so I won't get into the politics of that. How can AI govern to ensure explainability, auditability? Perfect. That's a very good question. Really, I think it starts from the fundamentals, garbage in, garbage out. I think if the humans don't understand what they're doing, how can the AI they trained on what they have developed understand that? I think starts from the fundamentals, bottoms up. Get to the fundamental first principles to the extent possible. So I think the PAT guideline of process understanding is the key. Good data goes to good information, good to good knowledge, good understanding, and wisdom. That's the sequence you have to follow. That's what I would suggest. Good. I caught up on most of the questions.
So, we have a few more questions. So, system having AI applied will be generating the data based on time to time maturity it gets. Will it reconstruct the exact model state used for the past decision?
No, so I think let's get clear about what AI is. What are we talking about? If you're talking about machine learning, So machine learning training starts with a training set and a test set and a validation set. So if you have prior data, you'll divide that into say two or three. I would prefer three groups. You will train the neural network on what I call training set. You will predict the performance of that for a test set, okay, which is a different set, but coming from the same population. And then you'll confirm that for a validation set, which is slightly different set that so you know how well it does. And so the neural network, essentially the weights that have been assigned to the nodes and so forth is set based on the training data set, correct? And so that's the model. At the moment, within the pharma manufacturing environment, learning from new experience is not allowed. So if you look at the GxP, so the dynamic aspect of learning from experience is not being allowed within the pharma set at the moment. I think um, uh, the Center for Devices is struggling with that for medical devices because they have allowed that to happen, and especially for medical imaging and so forth. And there have been lots of problems because how do you update that as more data is accumulated and so forth? The sector is struggling with coming up with a policy for that.
The next
Okay.
question that we have is what controls will have to deploy to ensure data privacy and prevent training on regulated data?
So data privacy is very, very important question. I think when you utilize any of the commercial chat GPT, Grok, and so forth, you're essentially giving your information away. Okay. That's the reason when earlier I said I used to use that, but more and more what I've done is I have developed my own small language thing so that I have a private network. So I have my own I have my own AI. I'm not using necessarily a commercial one anymore. Okay, because you're essentially sharing your data away. Things like Grok have a option to make it private thing, but I don't trust that. Okay, in fact, there are court cases coming out on IP related issues now, and there's a court case in California on patient related breach of ethics. So because you're using patient data in healthcare and so forth, right? So that's the reason when you use machine learning, you can just keep it inside. You don't need the chat GPT and so forth. So this is a very important question. And at the moment, if you're using any of those commercial ones, you're giving your data away. Remember that. How easy it for others to get, I don't know, but there are court cases happening now with those aspects. So many companies are essentially, for example, the ELSA for FDA, although they're using a commercially trained generative AI, but it has been brought in and closed out from the external world. Okay, so many of the companies are getting into contracts, or I'm going to use Gemini, I'm going to cloud for my company, but it's going to be within my company only. Nothing goes out. So you'll have to make those arrangements. But at the same time, what I would suggest is companies in India, I think, especially India has a lot of talent. The open AI models are so many available. You can start building your own private generative AI and train it as you want within your own sector. I think this is an opportunity in India, I think.
So the next question we have is, as per your experience, where AI has been introduced for performing OQ for non-critical changes in GxP processes.
No, I haven't. Um, I have the examples that I've been involved with have come from predictive maintenance and preventing deviations. Um, uh, the whole aspect of design space construction is one area, and I think. I am not aware of anybody taking a design space based on AI for a final FDA approval, although that proposal had come even when many years ago when I was at FDA and people have talked about it. Whether it has happened recently, I am not aware of that at the moment. So, uh, one case example of on a tablet formulation failure that was occurring due to lamination or capping for a was AI was used for machine learning was used to map that relationship and correct that. That occurred in a GMP setting. Okay. So there were changes made, but to make sure that corrective action was involved, and that did not require any prior approval supplement, is what I recall. Um, so that could be an example of what the question was asking.
Yeah, so the next question is about the framework, sir. So, what
Okay.
framework do you use to classify AI systems into GxP critical versus non GxP? And how do you justify that classification during inspections?
So if you're asking that question, rethink that question. You should not be using AI in GXP unless you have the stability purpose. So you're just inviting a warning letter right now if you're asking that question. Unless you have stability and capability proof of that for all of your manufactured products, I would recommend don't ever bring that question up for the FDA, because that's a warning letter waiting to happen.
So, the next question we have is it acceptable to FDA if investigations or QMS or analytical document write up supported by using Gen AI?
I would not recommend that. How I would suggest you leverage that is as a draft zero. You then make it your own document, but you are not bringing AI into the final documentation and opening that door for discussion with FDA. Very dangerous.
Okay. So, sir, with that, I think we are at the end of our session.
Okay.
We have answered a lot of questions. And if you have still questions, you can always drop it to us. You can write us, and we will make sure that we are getting back to you with the right answers. Also, so concluding with our question answer round, I'd like quickly again would like to share the article that Ajaz sir has written on smart practices for responding to FDA observational warnings using generative AI. So we are dropping that link in the chat box. You can go and read it. And if you have more suggestions, questions, please write to us. We will get back to you.
Also, just on that, I think it's about a year and a half old now. Okay, so that's an old article. So also connect with me on LinkedIn, because I write quite often from a professional development perspective. So you might have some additional information there that might be of interest to you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much, sir. So, on
Most welcome.
behalf of 115 pharma professionals and pharma IT leaders that have joined, I'd like to thank you for sharing the insights. This is a conversation this industry needed to have, and you are the person who could give it the credibility it deserved.
Thank you. Thank you for the
Thank you. Thank you
opportunity.
so much, sir.
All right.
And also to all our audience who has joined in this webinar. As I have mentioned in the beginning, so this is the start of something bigger what we are creating, the GPACTS 2025, which is going to happen in Mumbai, Ahmedabad, and Hyderabad. So I'm dropping a link for the survey where you can ask your questions, where you can give your suggestions on which topics we should curate for the agenda. If you have any speakers from whom you would like to listen to, so you can drop your suggestions. We are dropping the survey form in the chat box, and we will also be sharing this through the email that we will be sending after this webinar. And you all will get the recording for this webinar with the short summary of it.
So enjoy, and namaskar, sir, and salam to everyone. So enjoy the life as the world changes.
Yes, with the changing AI.
uh, AI is a double-edged sword. Use it properly. That's all, man. Okay, then.
Yes.
Bye now.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Sure.
Thank you for your
Thank
time
you.
tonight. Good evening.
Bye bye. Bye bye.